Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. I'm Josh Jones, and today's topic is AI era candidate risks, how TA leaders protect quality of hire and their jobs. Let's face it, TA is nervous, and with good reason, as AI reshapes how we hire, how we work, how we represent ourselves online. Not every change is for the better. Platforms are automating decisions that need human insight, while candidates are using AI to game the system and present a polished version of themselves that doesn't always hold up once they're hired. Over the next hour, we're going to explore how talent leaders can navigate these challenges, protect quality of hire, and safeguard their own roles. If you're worried about blind spots in your hiring process or how to ensure AI helps rather than hurts, you're in the right session. We're joined by a powerhouse duo. We've got Keirsten Greggs, founder and CEO of TRAPRecruiter, and Ben Mones, CEO and founder of Fama. They're going to share practical strategies to keep humans in the loop where it matters most, how to evaluate authenticity and risk in candidates, and how to understand the new signals that define ethical and intelligent hiring. Before we dive in, a couple of housekeeping notes. To connect with other attendees or join the conversation, please use the chat feature located in the upper right-hand side of your screen. If you have questions today, drop those in the Q&A tab. We'll get to as many as we can. And yes, today's webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the full replay within 24 hours of this session ending. Today's session has been made possible by our good friends at Fama. Fama's AI-powered online screening helps organizations prevent workplace misconduct, avoid reputational harm, and improve quality of hire, all while staying fully compliant. And now let's get started. Keirsten and Ben, it's awesome to have you both here today. I've known you both for quite a while, and I think this is the first time I've ever gotten to speak to you both at the same time.
Really? Oh my God, that's crazy. Yeah. Okay. New powerhouse coming together. I love it. Great.
The trifecta. Let's start
with combined. We put our bringing Captain Planet.
Captain, I love that show. Quick intros, Keirsten. Who are you and what do you do?
I am Keirsten Greggs, the founder of TRAPRecruiter, bringing trust, relationship building, accountability, and a proactive approach back into the recruiting lifecycle.
Love it. Ben, same question. Who are you and what do you do?
Without getting too philosophical, who I am today is Ben Mones, CEO, founder of Fama. As you mentioned, we're a talent screening company. We bring the dimension of who people are in text, image, and video into the talent screening process for companies all around the world. Excited to be here. And yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me to today's webinar.
Of course. Let's dive in. I want to start by talking about talent acquisition as it's related to today's age of AI. How is AI changing talent acquisition and what is driving these changes?
Sure. Maybe I can kick it off. So I think, when I think about AI in the world of talent acquisition, I try to think through what are the sorts of analog workflows or the goals of talent acquisition that are really impacted most importantly, by artificial intelligence overall. So it's less about what are the new ways of working or creating value, but how are you executing sort of the same sorts of tasks, realizing the same sorts of outcomes, but doing it in a slightly different way and doing it in a way that I think reflects demographic changes in the workforce and your expectations from a business unit, for example. But again, kind of bringing things we've always been doing into the world of AI. That's kind of how I interpret that question. I think the biggest, shift for us that we've been sort of tracking is just how the workforce has evolved and changed. I think this is something that we've seen, maybe qualitatively over the past few years, and many of us would sort of testify to. But the workplace looks a little different than it did 10 years ago. And I'll start with really kind of the demographic, changes that we've observed. And if you look at the kind of world population shift, something if you combine Generation Alpha, Gen Z, and Millennials make up now 70% of the world's population, right? And while Gen Alpha is slowly, I think, beginning to find their way probably into like summer internships and things like that, maybe working right now, this could actually be the first summer that the majority of Gen Alpha is starting up the summer internships, or even like, working at the golf course or the pool or whatever it might be, those candy stand or whatever that, or hot dog stand, I don't know, whatever that might be. These kids are working these days. That same change we're seeing in the workplace too, right? Where now in the United States, more than 50% of the workforce is Gen Z and millennial. That number is set to climb to 70% by 2030. And so from our perspective, how we think about it is that these demographic changes are obviously changing how employees interact with one another, how they engage with one another, right? Like we've talked, I think, on other webinars about how kind of like the era of happy hour is over, hanging out by the office cooler, if you will, during your lunch break. Remote businesses, digitally connected employees, more likely to probably engage on Reddit, Discord, LinkedIn, TikTok, right? And follow each other there for the first time than cheersing, a beer or a coffee for the first time in an in-person meeting, like when I, entered the workforce in the early 2000s. So I think that demographic shift of how the workplace has changed obviously has a second and third order impact on how talent acquisition teams are attracting those employees and finding those people and engaging with them in new and unique ways, right? So I think a lot of which, Keirsten, you and I have talked about before, the ways that candidates tend to engage with, employers that they want to work for, right? The way employers are engaging with them, right? Finding them on TikTok, maybe instead of at the job fair, right? We're seeing that sort of happening now, right? So that's sort of my long-winded explanation of what we're seeing is AI is only here and talent acquisition is only changing, not because it's like a cool tech and people want to use it, but because it mirrors pretty closely to how the demographics in the workplace has changed, and talent acquisition's goals of finding the best people, which has always been a thing, is now being changed and evolved by AI based on, I think, these demographic changes and ways to reach this new employee base. So.
Absolutely. So I want to piggyback on what you said. When I started recruiting in, 2000, a long time ago. Can't believe that's 25 years ago. That's literally 25 years ago.
Crazy.
That's insane. We were just starting to use the internet, just starting to use Monster. We were still using paper. We were still handshaking and getting hand sanitizers at the job fairs. We were still faxing. We were still handing pieces of paper. We were still interviewing in person. We were still engaging with people one-on-one or 50 on one or 100 on one, whatever the case may be. But now we've got a situation where, even 5 years ago, like this is how quickly things are going. That was the first generation of people who were wholly remote, whereas it wasn't just a small percentage. And now those folks are mid-level, in terms of how we think about experience level and seniority. And some of those people have never worked in an office setting, the way that we are used to. And from a TA and a recruiter perspective, we were the ones that were responsible for matching people to jobs. AI has given people the opportunity to match themselves to an organization, to a job, to a company culture, and it's leveled things a lot more than I think even TA was ready for. And I think that's where you get the pushback and you get the lack of collaboration. Doesn't necessarily come from us not wanting to meet the same goal or us having different objectives. It comes from us wanting to have control. It's like a power struggle that, they can go and use tools that will create their resume, give them the interview questions, sometimes so specifically that, there's whole companies that target FANG companies and the tech talent that wants to work there and says, these are the questions you're going to be asked for this job. So, there's a lot of that, whereas it used to be like recruiters, you're using tools that help you write better job descriptions when you can't get in touch with some people that we love to talk to who write the best job descriptions and help other people write good job descriptions. Or, we use AI to develop the best interview questions. We use AI to find more candidates. We use AI to, to stretch ourselves and now we've got candidates who are, applying to multiple jobs at a time, who are, if they're savvy enough, they are not even there for the interview. They are creating bots, they're creating their own GPTs. Like, they're doing all kinds of things that recruiters are still trying to catch up with. So, it becomes a situation where we all have to accept that it starts off level playing field, and each of us has to play our role in the ultimate goal of getting folks hired, the best folks hired.
I love it. It sounds like a complex situation, but it also sounds like with the leveling, there might be an introduction of fairness that maybe we haven't experienced in the past, which I'm here for it. I hope that's what we continue to see. I'm curious, though, about risks and challenges. What risks, challenges, and even opportunities is this going to create for employers, specifically dealing with our audience, talent acquisition?
Yeah, I think to Keirsten's point, like there is a leveling of the playing field, right? It's never been easier to appear qualified for a position, right? Because of, again, the nature of the systems that your Keirsten's describing, and Josh, you're describing here, is it's fundamentally based on these ideas that we can evaluate the sort of digital or technical nature of the individual, right? We can look at their resume that was created. Maybe we can comb the publicly available web if we're hiring a software engineer to look at their GitHub commits, right? Or maybe there's a set of written response questions that we're analyzing psychographically how they reply to them, video interviewing technology, right, that enables you to do the same thing. All of these kind of feed off what I'll essentially describe as a medium of communication and a medium of professional engagement that's increasingly digital, right? So in other words, the sort of proving ground, the training down, the source data is all coming from digital identity, right? And when things are digital, you can manipulate things, right? And so we, have a customer, and I think I'd said this on a previous ERE thing that we'd done, but we had a customer who told us that they believe right now 1 in 4 people that apply for jobs at their company are fake, and they think that that number is going to climb to half by I think 2028, right? And so we're living through this period where I think, to our point, you have employers who are saying, look, the workforce that we're targeting, they're familiar with digital tools, right? They I think if you survey a room of workers at a company and you ask how many people are using ChatGPT today, and it's a good question, how often are you accessing any LLM today as part of your professional or personal life? I think the majority of folks will put their hand up, right? How many are on social media? How many have a smartphone, right? How many of you go on these sorts of social networking sites like LinkedIn, for example? I think the majority of people today, you're going to see raise their hand or say I'm in, right? And so employers are saying, how do we find and target the ways that people work, the ways that people engage with the world around them, to accelerate that process that Keirsten described of finding, the right people for an organization? From a risk perspective, what that means is, like, you're subject to all the types of risks that have happened in the digital ecosystem since the 1990s, right? The same sorts of fraudulent behavior. Somebody isn't who they say they are. This question of trust, right, is now, again, an age-old concept, but something that's been, endlessly pursued and tried to pin down, of like, how do we make sure this person is who they say they are, that we can trust them in the interview process, that it's actually the John Smith or the Jane Smith that we're interviewing, and not some bot that was created by a North Korean hacker who's trying to get information about a financial services firm. Sounds crazy, but is real. There are people that are trying to get into companies and get a job and land it, only to stay for 2 weeks, capture as much IP that they can from an internal system, get out and, sell it on the dark web or bring that back to a state actor of some kind. Those are real conversations we've had with our customers about the risks that they're evaluating. But, we see it all the time of, why we exist really as a company is, forever, people are trying to figure out, how's this person going to act when they join, right? How are they going to act around fellow employees, around customers? Are they going to act, on the bad stuff, intolerant, hateful, violent towards other people? Are they, talking about getting high at work, right? And people can't do that in-person evaluation anymore. Or, really you talk about printing things out, Keirsten, before we started, like, did you print out your resume on a thick stock paper? You can't judge that kind of comparative nature of, quality and preparedness that someone's going to bring, or importance, the modular aspects of who a person is that they're going to bring into the job, right? And so it's why people turn to companies like ours, which is to say, hey, look, let's look at a person's digital identity. Let's see what they've done when the camera isn't on, when the interview hasn't started yet. If they've normalized acting, hateful, violent, or threatening towards other people, and if I never get a chance to meet them, if they can manipulate that interview and that digital presence to kind of answer that question in the interview, how do I look at what happened before and what happens after that interview from a monitoring perspective, even, that companies are pursuing. So I think the big risk is you're subject to the same sorts of perils that the internet, of all the great things it's also brought, the perils that are, introduced to our society, decades ago, right? So I think that's kind of the big question when it comes to risk. It's like, how do we overcome all the negatives that come with the glory of using, our digital presence in a more material way? So.
I like that you mentioned the fake profiles, meaning this person isn't real, and you gave an actual statistic of the number of people. But I think a lot of times we are looking at the outlier things, and what we've been talking about for some time, and this is on, the talent acquisition community, fake jobs. And you see a lot of job seekers paying attention now and talking about the jobs that are not real. My mother just got a text message the other day. She's retired, and it's the text message I get, that we all get probably all the time, that says, hi, I have this job for you. You can work this many hours. It won't take that much. It's $400. You'd be great for it. I found your resume on this job board. The important ones. See, I'm not saying names. I found your resume on this job board, and then it's some weird phone number and some weird email address that you have to connect to. But when you have people who are job seeking, especially those who haven't been job seekers for some time, depending on what generation that they're in, they might say, oh, wow, this is great. I didn't know this is how they're doing this now, because they applied for a job the other day and the system told them, do you want to sign up for email alerts? Do you want to sign up to get text messages? Put your phone number in and now you have it. So you have all those things where, again, it's another thing where it goes both ways. You got job seekers who are not real, and you have jobs who aren't real, and it becomes a risk. One thing I've been seeing over the past couple of days, and I'm hoping that it's an exception and not the rule, but you know how we are in this social media landscape. We love the exceptions. That's all we talk about. We make them the rules. But I'm seeing the accountability and the responsibility being owned by recruiters, and they happen to be in the industry that I came out of. And it's mostly defense and intel folks who are now saying, if you get a message from me, it's not from me. These are not my jobs. I've seen that multiple times over the past week. And that's telling me that there is something going on now. And it could be because of all the cuts in the federal government. It could be because of the cuts in the federal and state governments, that the government contractors are now having to scale back. And again, you have a larger pool of candidates who are now looking for positions, and someones are being bad actors, and they are creating these profiles in these jobs because the information's out there. You can go on LinkedIn and see who the recruiting manager is for XYZ company, and say, I'm creating a job for them. Like, LinkedIn allows you to create one job and start getting candidates. So it goes both ways. But what I'm loving is, like I say, seeing the accountability coming from the TA community and saying, here's what we're saying, like, not waiting for the reaction. Normally they'll say, oh, well, with the Workday suit or something, like, there's bias in our systems. Like, we've been pretending that there's not for so long. And now we're saying, yes, this is a problem, and we're getting in front of it. So I love that.
Yeah. And it's just to kind of piggyback off that, I'm reminded of an analogy, not in the world of talent acquisition, but kind of to your point of reaching out, of saying, hey, like, that's not me, just so you know, using that kind of old, or maybe a phone call, maybe someone you saw, in the neighborhood or at a grocery store or something like that, or just hit me up on your phone. I was at a restaurant, and I'm sure other people have seen this, but I was at a restaurant 2 weeks ago. Saw these teenagers who had like digital cameras. If like you guys remember, like the point and shoot digital cameras that had the SD card that you would put in. And, I asked one of them, I was just like, random dude coming up asking about your camera to a teenager or whatever. But in the in the sort of answer was really interesting. They'd said to me, they were like, yeah, everyone can use filters now on social media on our phones, right? Everyone can kind of transform what they look like and how they look. So we all got these cameras because you can't do that with these, right? You can change like the exposure and the lighting and all that. And I think what you're starting to see is TA kind of go back to the old way of doing things, still accepting these digital tools, but also recognizing there's a moment and there's space for how we used to work and how we engage with one another, right? That isn't like going back to, a hammer and nails or, caveman days by any stretch, but there is still that human opportunity, I think, with all this new technology that's coming in that, to your point, used appropriately, can really, I think, hedge against some of these risks that we're talking about and kind of the darker spots or the downsides of using technology. Because just to be clear, like, I think this technology transformation is fundamentally changing how to reach new people, how to find people, as Josh said, that might not appear, or an interview might be biased to say, interviewer might be biased, say, I don't know if I like this person or not, but hey, from a technology perspective, maybe they're more qualified. Now there's perils to that workday, that we could be talking about here, but on the other side of it, right, I think there's a lot of good that can come from using AI, but it's important to remember we're still people. We still got each other, right? We still got, even though they look like little computers, we still got our phones that we can pick up and call, and do things the old fashioned way, as opposed to like, doing everything with AI or our apps and all that. So
As a photographer, I love the digital camera story. And I think that we live in a post-truth reality in a lot of ways. And I think with a lot of these younger people, they're realizing that too. And there is kind of this pivot and this return to authenticity. And I think what I love about the work that your team is doing is there is this prioritization of truth, right? So as we live in this post-truth society, what are the things that we can do and what are the tools that we can leverage to bring truth and credibility back to these processes, not only our social lives, but our careers and our workplaces too, where it's very, very important.
So well said, by the way. I that's like should be like a quote. We're gonna put that on our
prioritization website. Of truth. Yes.
Prioritization of truth and credit. I'm putting you as my write-in candidate for 2028. That's what I'm doing. I'm liking that. Prioritization of truth and credibility. That's amazing. Yes. Yeah, so cool.
I want to pivot a little bit. So we've talked about AI from kind of a talent acquisition perspective and from a candidate perspective through the hiring process. But I want to talk about using AI to enhance TA and your career as a TA practitioner. What are some of the right ways to use AI in TA? What are some of the wrong ways? And then how do we find that balance between AI, automation, and the human touch in hiring? And Ben, we'll start with you.
Yeah, big question. I think let's start with, the idea, and the question is really focused on like the practitioner itself of ways to use AI to advance your own career within the company that you're in. And is that sort of how you're framing it, Josh, and how you're thinking about it, and the wrong ways to use it?
Yep.
Yeah, I think the first piece that I'd encourage folks to think about is like, just because you have new technology, your goals haven't changed. Your methodology might change, but your strategy, your approach, what matters to you, the hardcore truths that you've carried around with you for the course of your career, the things that have gotten you to the point, that you are now, or the things that you might think propel you to that next chapter. I think it's really important to remember that you can't sacrifice that. And your way of working and what has worked in the past will very likely continue to work, but the formulation, execution of that work is going to change. So what do I mean by that? I mean, thinking about using AI to automate and streamline what are rote or menial or repetitive tasks, right? I think using things as simple as AI schedulers, for example, especially in highly regulated industry where I've seen a multi-panel interview process, like there's people's lives that have fundamentally changed just by like Calendly on crack, more or less, right? And people who are finding ways to just automate that, sort of routine process. I think there's a lot of really interesting data segmentation, organization, and cleanup, things that companies might have done manually in the past in terms of, organizing your applicant tracking system or sorting and filtering and looking up. For example, I'm looking for a production person for my TV show that has had, X years of experience, has worked on these types of projects, and, has this sort of, background. Like those things are very easy to do now with AI that typically might have, been done manually, where in the past, I think, those sorts of Boolean searches or filtering through nasty old databases, like you don't have to do that anymore, but that definition of the quality candidate and those characteristics, that shouldn't change, right? I think people start to err when they start asking the AI to do their job for them, right? To give them the answers to the test without explaining to them how they got there. And I think the really important piece here too is like, so many of these LLM tools, these agentic systems, are non-deterministic, meaning that they don't have a single path or workflow of how they're completed every single time. In other words, like you guys probably all have experience, people who've experimented, I know this call, but certainly a bunch of our listeners, like you ask Grok, you ask ChatGPT, whatever you like to use, Gemini, the same question 3 different times could give you 3 different answers, right? And so it's really important, I think, to kind of check your work and to not trust the critical analyses that come out of some of these AI tools, but certainly for streamlining process, if you're making decisions based on who to interview alone using an AI tool, I think that is fraught with peril right now. I think that is a really, really big risk that you might be taking because of that non-deterministic system. I think regulation is starting to catch up to that in general. And look, I think there will be opportunities. Let's call a spade. There will be opportunities that your employers are going to see to reduce headcount. That's going to happen. There's going to be companies that are going to try to find ways to reduce headcount through AI, particularly in the world of talent acquisition. But I think where you can level up as an employee of one of these companies or as a leader in one of these companies is to find ways to accelerate your own productivity or your own output. Because the human and AI, component, that's where we're starting to see a lot of really positive results, is those 2 things together. So, a lot there certainly, but I would say think about it not to kind of replace the work that you're doing, but to automate and streamline it. Don't look for the critical analyses or complex tasks to be, handled end to end by an AI system. So I don't know. I have a lot of opinions on that one. That's for sure.
I don't really have much to add. You covered everything, but I just want to charge the TA folks that, a human has to stay in the loop. We have been using these tools forever. And one thing that we need to remember is that, these AI can help us go faster. It can help us be more efficient. It can help us be more strategic as opposed to transactional. And you mentioned some of those repetitive transactional tasks that sometimes fall on, especially when they're in a smaller organization, 1 recruiter doing everything or 2 recruiters doing everything. So using a human using the data and using the insights to make more informed decisions is the way that we really want to approach this. And I love how you talked about like Calendly and using scheduling, because that is a major pain point. Do you know how hard it is to wrangle 5 people in different places to get and then by the time you get everyone together and agreed, something has changed. So I love that you just the calendar thing takes a huge bit of time, or gives a huge chunk of time back to your TA team.
And that maybe gives them time to be more thoughtful about the rec that they're writing, or to engage with the business leaders and say, hey, I know you guys said this was the JD you wanted, but I thought more about it and I had a little bit extra time because I wasn't scheduling. Like, here's how I think we should, maybe recraft, restructure, or, think about the output we're seeking from this person when they come in. So I couldn't agree more. I think it's not a, zero-sum game, right? If something gets taken off your plate, it allows you to do so much more, right? So that's really exciting thing about it.
We've got a little bit of time. We've got some questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to pivot for just a second. Ellen asks, I'm curious about how TA people are dealing with the volume of candidates. I think about colleges who now get thousands of applications because of the Common App. They pretty much shut down all activities other than reading applications for several months or weeks each year to get through the volume. TA professionals can't do that.
No, you can't. So how do we deal with the influx of candidates? I'm going to date myself, but I don't know if it was Ben or Joshua that said it first, but it was, we still have to do the same job. Like, we're still doing the same processes. We still have the same role. Like, we're not throwing that out the window. The tools that we use to do that job, may change a bit, but we're not changing the way we're not changing the job that we're doing. So I say that to say, we used to have something called a data management technique. And I'm saying this because I come from I come from enterprise organizations. This doesn't apply to everyone, but as long as you have it written down that this is my process and I'm only going to review the first XYZ candidates, like, that's a way to get through that. Or you can, again, use your filters, depending on which CRM or which ATS you use. You can use filters, you can use your technology to help you sort, to help you, figure things out a little better, but we can't let the technology do the thinking for us. And at a high level, this is what the Workday suit is about, that it's saying that I was auto rejected because it was biased against me because I was doing these things. But there's a human that decided which applicants get auto rejected. There was a human that decided if then, either or, if and. So, like, we have to understand that it's our decisions and how we decide to use these tools and how we decide to use these systems to make us better. Like, if we're just doing it to get some stuff off our plate, if we're just going through and saying, all right, I'm looking for, somebody, I'm looking for the person that I know applied from, from University of Maryland. I'm picking that school. I don't know why. University of Maryland with this, and here we go. Boom. I'm going through that. But again, that person, is way down on the list, or you didn't get to your number of candidates that you need to get to before you found the person that you're going to advance to the next level, all of that. We just have to be more thoughtful in making the rules for ourselves that apply and that keep us compliant to whatever we said we were going to do. Don't let AI make your decisions. Like I said, use the data, use the insights to make more informed and better informed decisions, because it's going to take you longer as a person to, like, throw all those folks on a spreadsheet, create your filters and all that, when you have systems that can do that for you like that.
Totally. And, I have, like, even a more contrarian point of view on this one. I mean, we all saw, what was it, less than a month ago, Monster and Career Builder filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I'm sure many of us in the industry saw it, and how many of us relied on those websites in the early days, right? My hot take, that's the canary in the coal mine of what's coming. Now, without even talking about the merits of how well or poorly these two companies ran, their businesses, I would encourage the person who asked that question, you think you're frustrated going through all those accounts? How about the candidates? How about the candidates who are dropping in all of these resumes and all of these applications? We've all seen that stuff on LinkedIn that's super viral. I've applied to, X hundreds of jobs. I'm not getting any calls back, a plea for help. If anyone can help me, I'd do anything, right? And luckily the community in a lot of those cases tends to lift those people up, right? But, the bottom line from my perspective is, like, everyone is feeling that, and the candidates feel it the most. The employers, you're feeling it because you got a lot to filter through as a recruiter. But imagine the candidate that is now late on a car payment or on a mortgage payment, or is applying to all these different jobs and they can't make it happen, and they got a family to support. Maybe they got school bills. Hell, maybe they're just, graduated from high school and they're trying to find their next job and get out of their parents' house, right? Like there's a lot of different stakeholders here. And I think, Monster and Career Builder, it's sort of a signal that world is getting fragmented because frustration is being felt on both sides. So, as I see it sort of evolving, it's highly targeted inbound channels. And again, it goes down to this question of like, who are you recruiting? If you're opening up a job to the world of any type of person, then if you have a generalist sort of hiring role that you're trying to fill, that there's a lot of potential candidates for it, you're going to expect a lot of applications for that role. And that's just what you should expect. And I think using the online record to do it is going to be really, really difficult to attract talent because of these reasons. The frustration is building on both sides. The platforms are changing that people are using to engage, with the world around them, right? I'm sure there'll be more consolidation in the future, but it's almost as if you as a recruiter have to rethink the recruitment channels that you're running and maybe look for lower distribution, higher conversion in some of those channels and say, all right, well, maybe I'm cool with like seeing fewer candidates for this particular JD that I'm trying to fill, as long as they convert at a higher clip. And, there's real people, behind it, right? And I also think the shift from, what I'll just call or shift into passive recruiting. There's a lot of new technology out there that is similar, I think, Keirsten, what you described, except not a scam, right? Of trying to engage with people where they are and where they live and where they spend their time. I'm thinking like a hyper-targeted LinkedIn ad, for example, that you upload your audience, say this is exactly the profile of who we want, but determining the profile of who we want requires the time spent and investment to figure out what that right JD looks like that maps to the business requirements, the outcomes that you're trying to create. But at the end of the day, my perspective is like, you think you're frustrated? Imagine the candidate. Imagine how frustrated they are. And people aren't going to keep doing the same thing. This is going to change very soon because the candidates are going to be just as frustrated before you reach your tipping point. They're going to reach their tipping point in mass months, if not years prior. So how can you sort of adapt in the interim, I think, is the kind of question to the question.
What a mic drop moment. I love it. I mean, clearly we've got to do better, right? There's got to be a better way. I'm not going to name names. I'm sure some of you out there saw it. There was a post recently on LinkedIn. An AI company was kind of flagging some candidates for using AI during their own interviewing process. And people got triggered. But there was some comments in the thread that was saying things to the effect of AI should never be used in the recruiting process ever. But wait a minute. I mean, I think those of us on camera right now, we're maybe a little bit older than maybe some of the folks that are in the audience, right? So back in the day, when you apply for a job, how many people are you competing with? Maybe 100, 500 tops, however many it might be, right? You can only go through so many. If Keirsten and I are hiring for a job, we can only look at so many people. We can only talk to so many people. But with AI, we can talk to infinite people. So it's a fair opportunity for everyone. You think you're a fit for the job? Talk to Angie, our AI recruiter. She's going to ask the right follow-up questions, and you're going to get a fair chance at bat. And Angie never gets tired. So she's not going to be like, oh, I'm ready for lunch and cut the interview short or whatever. You're going to get 100% fair chance at bat like everyone else. And I'm here for it. I think that fairness is great. Anyway, we got to do better, folks. That's what we're talking about right here. Which leads me to, we're going to, in a moment, get into traditional versus modern hiring, right? And I want to talk about where TA can kind of identify when, where, and how to use AI versus what things the people should own themselves and where do humans need to stay in the loop. Ben, I'll lead with you.
Yeah, I think thematically we've covered some of the core concepts. I think the human factor has to sit within the definition of, and I think it's really the shift for Fama. I'll just talk about, through Fama and how we think about hiring, right? We are long past this is the profile of the person that we want. What we are seeking is the outcomes. What are the tasks and activities that this role needs to run with to generate the outcomes that we're looking for at this company, right? Which sort of shifts this idea of like, what's the years of experience, the school that they went to or didn't go to, for example. Like, do I want someone in industry, out of industry? We've sort of reformatted our approach to think more about the outcomes that we're trying to generate. And so I think that definition has to be human-centric, right? You have to have that sort of ability to interpret the vague JD that your business leader gives you, right? The 5 bullet points. You're like, yeah, this is what we're looking for in the role. Just go find this person, right? I'm sure we've all been on the other side of it, right? Like, okay, like let me go do my thing. But that's where the secret sauce comes in, right? Is like being able to understand, ask the right question, listen when appropriate. And I think a lot of those factors that, in my personal opinion, have been so core to success in business, is the 90% of listening, intra-team communication, inter-team communication, finding ways to ask the right questions, to prompt without leading, that kind of thing. That's that kind of, I would say, human factor that leads to the technical, realization of value, which at the end of the day, these technical systems, they can help you achieve, AI or not, help you achieve your goals, but they're only going to help you achieve your goals insofar as the goal is the right goal, and the components that lead to the accomplishment of that goal are effectively illustrated and outlined, right? And so I think where the human factor really comes in is in the areas that we counted on before, but are now even more important, before thinking about AI. So that's my quick take, is like the human side of things is what it's always been, but has to be, I think, in this context, more closely tied to how do I tell the machine what to look for? How do I tell the machine what to do and give it explicit results? And I'll even use a non-recruiting example. When I use an LLM or an agent of some kind, any prompt in general, I have sort of like a preloaded pre-prompt in the solution that I use, where I just say, read every article. Don't try to skip it. Don't guess what every article is about when I tell you to go do this research. Read the entire thing and make sure you double check anything you're unsure of. Don't hallucinate, and go end to end with it, right? And I think similarly, the requirements gathering for any AI recruiting tool needs to be even sharper than ever before. And that's kind of what my take is. I'll just stop there. So.
Brilliant. Keirsten, I want to hear your thoughts.
I don't want to belabor this too much, but I want to go back to something you said, Josh, about when you're applying for a job, we didn't know how many people were applying, right? Well, now, and I'm going to talk about LinkedIn because you brought up LinkedIn. Some people will go on LinkedIn, and depending on what type of account they have, they can see how many people have applied. And I'm using air quotes specifically because, again, we have data, but a lot of people don't have insight into that data and what it really means. So where we, the older people, we're using other things to get people to self-select out. Now, AI technology has made it possible for people to self-select out before they even click on that job, because they might see that and be like, oh my goodness, now 75 people, it's only been open for an hour. Like, how is this possible? Or and on the flip side, you're a recruiter and you open this job that you thought was maybe not purple, but perhaps an orange squirrel, like somewhere in the middle. And why are 500 people applying for your job the first day? And that's for you to think, is this job written well? Am I really getting to the heart of what this is, et cetera? Like, because when I used my AI tool, it told me there were only this many people. And on the good side, it's like, hey, listen, here's some opportunities for recruiters. Remember when we used to have to log into every system separately to post a job, have to log into every system separately to source candidates? Now we can do that at one time. Like, each thing is one step. On the candidate side, they used to only be able to research companies based on what the website said about that company, or word of mouth. And what if you don't know anybody that works there? What if there's not a Facebook group or a Reddit that is already saying how terrible this place is to work, or the Glassdoor ratings were all written by the recruiting staff because they want people to come and work there? So now we have, an opportunity for candidates to even research a company, which we tell them to do, to research more companies at the same time and even find out who these companies' competitors actually are. Who are other companies like this? Where are some other great places to work? So there's opportunities and there's risks on both sides. But if each of us use these things with, like you said, with the human, keeping the human centered and keeping, just goodness and not bad conduct in mind, then I think we'll all fare better.
I love it. We're kind of circling the wagons around
Shoot.
where I want to head with this traditional versus modern hiring. And so I just want to really start to focus in on that now. What does traditional hiring look like, and where is it falling short today?
Sure.
Well, it's just what it's just what I said. Like, we're not meeting in person like we used to. Like, if you're not going to catch up with the time, we talk a lot about the candidate experience. And I like to say that the candidate experience is also the recruiter experience, because if the recruiter is not happy, if the recruiter is not getting, having a good time, and they are the central point of the entire hiring process, then things are going to be bad. Like, things are going to go awry. So traditionally, again, we would have a phone screen that is someone picking up the phone or someone doing this, camera thing. But now you have, AI bots and people are recording things. I've said this multiple times. That's not my favorite. I don't prefer it, because I think that's that touch point for a recruiter is huge in terms of decision making and even relationship building, like talking to a person and knowing which, additional questions to ask, which probing questions to ask. I was talking to someone the other day, and they heard, because of my accent, they heard me say something different. And I was like, and then like at that point, the conversation had gone on because neither one of us wanted to admit that we were not understanding what the other person was saying. Like the things that we were like, they weren't clicking. And then I was like, you heard me say X, right? And they were like, no, I thought you said Y. I was like, oh, okay, no, I said that. And then it came back together. But with AI, you don't have that. Real quick, Nicole sent me a message today, a TikTok actually, of these AI bots that were like flickering out, like they were glitching. And then it got to it were two. So the hiring manager and the recruiter or whatever, AI bot talking to the candidate. And then they started talking to each other and offered the bot a job, like on the spot. So like, there's things like that we can't do. And then again, we touched on this early in the conversation. We do have people that are not real people, who are bots, or they are interviewing for their friend, and then the person who shows up the first day is someone else. So, we've got to come to where we level set back there. There are good things about the traditional hiring process, and then there are things about the modern hiring process that enhance that. So where it's not reasonable to everyone meet in person every single time, we have to get somewhere where we're not solely relying on technology over the human touch.
For sure. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Keirsten's saying. And I think the only expansion of the concept I would offer would be, with traditional hiring, I am sure for the majority of recruiters, the reason that you were selected to join the company, or that you chose to join the company that you joined today, maybe you're running your own shop, whatever it might be, is not because you're great at filtering through all the Indeed inbound, applications for a role. They're like, oh, my specialty is looking through a long list of candidates and telling you exactly just by looking at the, job submission, who's going to be a fit and who's not. I think, the question you have to ask yourself traditionally is like, what makes you great? What are the things that got you to this point in your career, right? And it's a tough question. It's something that you can spend time with, on your own. You can ask a peer, you can ask a boss, you can say, hey, what were the things that like you really loved about my ability to communicate, to listen, to understand, to engage with candidates, to meet them where they're at? Or maybe it is to do the passive recruiting where I can reach out to folks that maybe aren't seeking a job, and I'm the best at convincing them to, to make that change. Because how, traditional hiring evolves, again, is only a function of the workforce. I know it's the first thing that we talked about, but like the way that TA evolves is only not because they want to, or because they think the technology is cool, or because they're, sure, there are some people that want to use new technology because they're personally passionate about it. Maybe they want to elevate their own skill set, so they learn new tools. And just like a carpenter learning how to use a handsaw or a table saw, whatever it might be, instead of a handsaw that they have, right? And so, I think the question becomes, how do you evolve the things that have worked traditionally for this workforce today? Because the workforce is changing. The technology that they're familiar with and comfortable with is different than 10 years ago, fundamentally different, not just a little bit different, but very different for the mass portion of the population that's in the workplace today. So your tech stack should only evolve, your toolkit should only evolve insofar as the people that you are trying to attract, or if you're on the employee relations or generalist HR side, the people you're trying to keep, the culture you're trying to build, that's where your ear has to be. And if you don't know the workforce demographic that you're seeking to build or that you have today, you're screwed. Right now, that's it. Plain and simple. Technology is going to take you by storm. You're going to bring in a tech. You're going to have the wrong requirements. Someone's going to be upset because the job wasn't filled and there was turnover in the first 90 days, whatever it might be. That's the problem. So I think the question really is, keep doing the things that made you great and the traditional stuff that got you to this point. In other words, like who you are as a professional. And then think through, how has the demographics in the workplace changed? Am I still screening candidates in our world? We use this graphic in our sales calls that's like half image of a typewriter and half image of a MacBook. Are you screening like you're in the typewriter generation? Or are you screening in the MacBook generation, right? Like that's the first question we ask our customers or our prospects, which is to say, like, is your toolkit tuned to the current demographic in the workplace and the people that are largely digital natives that are on their phones, that are connecting on Discord, on TikTok, instead of in person at happy hour with a water cooler? So that's my general perspective is like, don't change who you are or the things that made you great, because there's a reason you're here. You earned it. Like there's a reason you are in the seat you are in right now, is because you got yourself there. No one gave you a handout. No one gave you a leg up. You did it. And keep doing those things, but make sure that you're tuning your toolkit to reflect the changes in the workplace.
Love it. I want to pivot to one of the questions from the chat. Marlene asks, can you speak a little bit about the pros and cons of pre-recorded video interviews as a gatekeeping tactic? And what advice do you have for candidates to navigate requests for pre-recorded videos?
I was going to say, I'm mostly anti, so maybe I'll give the cons and you can give the pros.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I'll go first. Sorry. So,
okay.
Look, I think on one hand, it's totally appropriate for a candidate to say, I don't feel comfortable recording this call. Period. Hard stop. As an employer, you should be totally cool with that too. Like in the same way that if I was in an in-person interview and someone's like, all right, Ben, and we turn on the tape recorder, like this is not a deposition. This is a job interview, right? So it's totally appropriate for a candidate and for an employer to be accepting of the fact, like Keirsten's about to go into, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. The benefit, however, is you can see the forest in the trees a little bit better by recording some of this, right? So again, there is no utility to the candidate. The utility in recording the conversation, unless you're like, if it would be useful to you, I can send you a copy of this recording after the call so that you can improve your own interviewing capability. Is that going to land? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe someone's like interviewing because they want to get better. I don't think people interview to get better at interviewing, right? They interview to stop interviewing so they can have a job and not have to interview again, right? No one wants like feedback on how they did in the interview most of the time. But, I think the important thing for employers to recognize the positives is you can see trend lines and questions your recruiters are asking can help you tweak, your job description, your candidate profile that you're seeking, the outcomes, the skills, whatever it might be that you're trying to build. That's where the benefit is, but it has to be taken with a healthy dose of like, if someone wants to opt out, you mentioned candidate experience, Keirsten. I call it the employee experience. There's no difference from my perspective. The employee experience starts with the first interview. And if one of your employees said, oh, well, I don't feel comfortable recording this call because I want to talk to you about the things my manager has said to me that make me uncomfortable. And you're like, well, we have to. That's not a great employee experience, right? And so you have to apply the same sort of rigor, I think, to candidates who might not want to be recorded.
Love it.
Okay.
I'm going to start moving fast because we're coming to the end. There's still so much to cover.
So again, can I just say so here's the thing. Don't use it as a replacement. Use it as a tool, which it's intended to be. So if you're doing video interviews, phone screens, it's not a big deal. It's not a bad thing, but they when you can have a human there too, or use the AI tool to transcribe, because we all we take notes, we do this, and sometimes we forget, or we don't write something down, or we can't read what we wrote, or we're not typing fast enough, and then we're like, I don't know what happened there. But if we're using it to just inject more bias into the process, then we're doing the wrong thing. But using it, like I said, for transcription or to help us be, to record and to give, like Ben said, give them back some feedback. I think employees / job seekers will love that, because they do have tools that actually allow them to practice getting comfortable talking back and forth and asking the right questions.
Love it. 100%. When used right, it is a more fair process, right?
Yes.
I'm almost afraid to ask this question because we've all been watching the news and we're all on LinkedIn, but what happens when employers fail to catch bad behaviors and cultural risks within these hiring processes?
Yeah, we see it all the time. We deal in the currency of helping companies avoid risk, and I think we all know what it feels like when we're dealing with the result. I think that's the kind of something I don't need to spend any time on, just knowing how much time we have here left on this webinar. We've all gotten that phone call late at night, or had to fire somebody, or counsel somebody because of something terrible that happened, or something that got blown up with a customer, or at an offsite, or something like that, right? But I think what most people don't know about the way that misconduct in an organization manifests is, if you think about somebody that normalizes, let's say, acting misogynistic towards women, right? And they're hired, who's a director or a VP in a company, right? And they make a sexist joke in a meeting. That behavior is observed by other employees at that company, right? That behavior is seen and identified. And if no one checks that person, which might be tough if everyone in the room is junior, because nobody wants to speak out against the person who's more senior than them, happens all the time, very normal in an organization, that manifests in a company. It metastasizes. And there's something, that we look at a lot at Fama. We call it the misconduct multiplier effect, which is essentially like one single incidence of misconduct in a company leads to 1.5x more misconduct in that business. In other words, that observed behavior then becomes adopted by other people, and other people begin evidencing those behaviors in organizations, right? So it's one of these things that it is very possible to identify this sort of behavior early before it becomes a problem. And I always counsel people, you don't have to not hire somebody because of something that you found. Like if you found somebody saying something misogynistic on social media, maybe it's one comment they made 6 years ago and you really like the candidate, they have the experience, right? A conversation as simple as like, that stuff doesn't fly here. That's not how we behave at this company. We know it was one post. We still want to hire you. It's all good. But know that that's not how we act in this business, because that sort of thing going unchecked and that becoming normalized, that becoming adopted, will spread to others, affect more people. And you as the recruiter are going to feel terrible about the fact that you didn't, see that or identify that before it became a real problem that, your compadres in HR, employee relations, or legal are now dealing with. So
I love the fact that you're able to use that technology to elevate someone, right? That it wasn't, you didn't get the job. It's like, hey, we like you, but you can be even better.
yeah.
What does a modern TA, excuse me, what does a modern TA tech stack look like? And how do we tie it into what you're talking about? How can we resolve these issues with a modern tech stack?
Keirsten, I'll let you take that one because I just talked for her.
Okay. As much as I would love, there will never be one tool that does everything. There just never will. It will require entirely too much customization. It would require too much fine tuning for a process, and variables that are extremely nuanced because there is no straight line from requisition to hired to retention. There's no straight line at all. I call it chutes and ladders for those of you who are old enough to know what that game is. But you imagine getting all the way to the top and you hit and you got to come all the way back down. Like that happens. And that happens when we don't do things like Ben just said, like pointing out, behaviors earlier in the process, pointing out where we can improve things from both the candidate and the TA perspective. So have tools that align with your process. Yeah. Do not get tools that someone told you need. What do I mean by that? Already know what your must-haves are. Already know what your pain points are. Already know what you need from a tool, what you need it to do. Don't have someone come to you and say, you need a Bugatti and you live on a dirt road with rocks. And every time you drive, your undercarriage and your paint job is going to get scratched up and tore up because you bought a vehicle that did not align with your lifestyle. Same thing for recruiting. Buy things that align with your processes. Buy technology that collaborates and is cohesive with the other technologies that you're going to continue to use.
Preach. No lies.
I love that. Yeah, totally.
Ben, I'm going to ask you a closing statement because we're running out of time. If there was one mindset shift you hope every TA leader walks away with today, what would it be?
It's a tough one. I would say look around your workplace. What does the workplace look like? Is it different than it was 10 years ago? Where do these people live their lives? How do they engage? What does the talent pool look like? And how is that different? I mean, on the fundamentals, not age, gender, race, those sorts of things, but where do people spend their time? How do they live? Understanding that question, I think, is going to inform a lot about what Keirsten's saying of like building your toolkit and understanding how your process and your ideal candidate profile, to call it, can really be realized through technology. So take a hard look at your workplace, understand like, are we suddenly totally different than we were 10 years ago, right? Is it more Gen Z and millennials? Is that 50% true in my organization? Is it less? Is it more? Like, who are you? I think someone in the chat just said, know your customer personas, like Aaron mentioned it. Customer persona, that's what salespeople talk about, your candidate persona.
Yeah.
Who are you really going after? And not your employee, not just like your candidates, but who are your employees? That sort of thing too. I know that sounds basic, but I think a lot of people overlook that of like, who are we actually trying to hire and who's in our company today? Like, for real.
Wise words. We missed one or two questions. I'm going to get those questions over to the team at Fama, so they'll be able to follow up with you after this presentation. Keirsten, Ben, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks to Fama for making this webinar possible. And thanks to all of you who tuned in and giving us meaning to our work. If you ever want to be a speaker, we always look for exciting voices to include in our programming. And if you're not ready to be a speaker, but you've got topics that are just burning and keeping you awake at night, let me know what those are, because we want to bring you the stuff that's going to help you be more effective within your organization. Until next time, it's been great. We'll see you real soon. Stay tuned for future webinars coming at you real fast. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.